All right, y'all, are you ready to bust the biggest homeschooling myth that's out there? This is the one that when you bring it up, every homeschooler rolls their eyes and goes, oh my gosh, here we go again. What's that myth? Homeschoolers aren't socialized. Oh my gosh, I am so excited to bust this myth today because let me tell you something. This is one of those things that is so misunderstood. And as a former educator, someone who's spent time in the classroom, someone who is trained and certified and all that fun stuff, I can tell you that this is a lie. And today we're going to talk about why this is a lie. All right? So, are you ready? Let's bust this huge, huge myth. Here's the thing. I want you to think back to when you were in school. I want you to also realize that what school looked like for you is not what it looks like now, okay? So when you think back, when I think back, and I'm like early 40s, okay? So I was in school, let's say if we're talking elementary school, it was like 30 some odd years ago, right? Yeesh. So when we think about what school was like 30, I'll even say 20 years ago, I'd even say 15 years ago, okay? It was so different than what it is now. And there are so many factors that go into why it is so different. We can't even get into all of them, and it would get kind of political, and we don't want to do that. So, suffice to say that when we were in school, those of you who are around my age or thereabouts, we had a lot more time to do what we think of as socializing. We had a lot of actual recess time. We had a lot of that time when everyone's kind of working on their own thing and you're maybe kind of chatting with a neighbor and you're maybe working on a project together. We had a lot more loose classrooms in some ways. Obviously, some teachers were really strict and others were not. But in general, school was a little bit more laid back than it is now. It was still a good education. It was still, we learned a lot, but we were not experiencing what students are experiencing today. What students experience today are lunches where they have 15 minutes to eat and they don't get to talk. Or they have 15 minutes to eat and then you get 10 minutes on the playground, but if you're running too much, you're gonna get in trouble. Or where you're in a classroom where your poor teacher, and this is not her fault or his fault, your poor teacher is so focused on that next assessment that's coming up, on the STAR test, on the Iowa test, the CAP test, whatever that standardized test is that's coming, and they are going crazy trying to make sure that everyone's ready and that everyone's prepared and they're doing all this test prep. And they're having to cut out things that you and I used to take all the time. My gosh, I think back to when I was in middle school, we had woodworking and cooking and sewing. Those were classes we took on the regular, right? Schools these days, there's no time for that because they are doing so much test prep and the curriculum has gotten crazy. It's out of hand. And because of this, that time that you and I had to socialize, okay, students don't have that anymore. So when we talk about this whole homeschoolers aren't socialized, what a lot of us, people our age, are thinking is we're thinking back to what it was like when we were kids. And we're not even going to talk about what homeschooling was like then. We're going to talk about what homeschooling is like now. And I will say that the time that homeschoolers get to socialize is significantly more than the kids in school and conventional, what I call conventional school, public and private, so much more time than they get. Now, the other thing that people think when they hear homeschoolers and they think, oh my gosh, they're not socialized, they automatically assume that homeschoolers are sitting at a kitchen table with their parent day in and day out for 7 hours a day. And you're doing workbooks and you're doing textbooks and you're taking a test and you're essentially doing what they do in conventional school, but at home at the kitchen table or the dining room table or at a desk. They think it probably looks just like a classroom. It's just, your living room. Okay, some families, yes, that is the way that some families homeschool. Not very many. And even those who do take that kind of approach, what they're actually doing, first of all, they're not spending 7 hours a day. Because when you homeschool one child per grade, okay, or maybe let's say you even have 6 children, okay, these big homeschooling families, right, they've got 6 kids, they're still not spending 7 hours a day on school. because they're grouping those kids together and they're knocking out science and history with 2 or 3 or 4 of them at a time. And they're only spending 20, 30 minutes maybe on that, because when you don't have 30 kids to try to shepherd through a lesson, you can get through things a lot faster. The time that you lose in transitions between subjects, oh my gosh, I actually sat down and calculated one day when I was teaching, when I was in the classroom, how much time I lost every day moving from one subject to another. It was nuts. And you add in things like having to actually leave the classroom, like the transition from here to science lab or here to computer lab, from here to lunch or recess or whatever. And then you add in having to deal with behavior stuff. That kid who will not stop talking, that kid who's throwing a tantrum, that kid that, whatever. Or having to answer like 10 questions because you've got 30 kids and not everybody's getting everything at the same time, right? So this kid asks a question and that makes this kid ask a question, and then somebody else has a question and somebody wasn't listening, so they asked the question that the first person asked. Okay, so it takes you, to get through a 10-minute math lesson might take you 30 minutes. Because first you have to get everyone on the same page, and then you have to get everybody doing the same thing, and then you have to answer all these questions and clarify everything and reteach for these 3 kids. So the time that kids are spending in the classroom is significantly more time than they have to spend at home. And that means homeschoolers have significantly more time to go out and do fun stuff in society. Not in their classroom, and not at their kitchen table, not inside their house. They go out and they do game days, or they go rock wall climbing, or they go to gymnastics with other homeschoolers. And yes, kids, obviously kids in conventional school go to gymnastics and rock, and they do these things as well. But the difference is that our kids are doing it after only spending 2 or 3 hours working on school. They're not spending 7 hours there, coming out of there exhausted, and then trying to squeeze in a bunch of socializing and a bunch of stuff to all these extracurriculars, and then coming home and doing homework and then crashing in bed, right? Our kids are going into this stuff fresh because they only spent 2 or 3 hours on school today. And so when they go out to socialize, they're really socializing. They're hanging out, they're talking, they're active, they're doing stuff. And a lot of times homeschoolers will say, don't really feel like sitting at the kitchen table today, so let's take our school to the library. Or let's not do our textbooks and our curriculum at all. Let's go to the zoo. Let's go to the museum. Let's just go to the park. It's a gorgeous day out. Why on earth are we sitting inside? Let's go to the park. Let's call a bunch of our other homeschooling friends and have them meet us there. So no, homeschoolers are not sitting at a kitchen table for 7 hours every day. So when you think of, homeschoolers don't socialize because they're homeschooling, stuck in the house, no, that's not what they're doing. We have co-ops, we have classes, we have groups, we have all of these things because we know our kids, we want our kids to go out and be with other people. We don't want to sequester them inside and hide them. I'm not homeschooling to try to raise my children in a bubble, okay? I'm raising them as a homeschooler for lots and lots of different reasons, and protecting them from certain things is one of those reasons, but I don't protect them by not allowing them contact with the outside world, okay? Not only that, but for example, in our neighborhood, and I know not everyone is as blessed as we are to have a neighborhood like this, we live in a neighborhood that is chock full of kids. When we first moved here, there were 18 children between the ages of like 6 and I think it was like 10 or something, 10 or 12 or something like that. 18 kids. Now, we were the only homeschoolers at the time. There's a public school right down the street, so they all went to that school. But after school, summers, holidays, weekends, there were a zillion kids out there. Not only that, but we happen to be Christians. We spend time at church. My girls have a youth thing that they go to on Wednesday nights. They have Sunday school that they go to on Sundays, obviously. The middle and upper school students, which one of my daughters is in, they do Tuesday night hangouts during the summer and actually during the school year. And during the summer, they also do Thursday game days. So that child is spending 4 days a week during the summer out at church, hanging out with friends. During the school year, she's spending 3 days a week with those kids. Plus, we've got our classes that we do. I have a daughter that is a crazy monkey. She climbs like you wouldn't believe. And so we are in a homeschool climbing class at the indoor rock wall place. She just started gymnastics, so she's doing that too. We're in a group that does game days, like I mentioned earlier, every other week. We meet at a comic book store and we play tabletop games, and there's actually a mom that runs D&D campaigns, nice fluffy fun ones for the kids. But we're socializing so much that I have to look at our calendars sometimes and say, okay, guys, we need to take something off. We need to not socialize quite so much because mom has to work and I need to be home and I cannot chauffeur you to 8 million things. Like, we actually cut our kids off. You get two activities that I will take you to every week. Pick what they are and then we're done, because that's 4 because they don't like doing the same things. So that's crazy. We spend so much time socializing. Now, the other thing I want you to think about, and again, coming from a classroom teacher, 6 years of classroom experience here, I can tell you that the thing I said more to my students than anything else was, why are you talking? You are not here to socialize. So what is all of this socialization that kids are supposedly getting in conventional school, okay? Because I can tell you that I had a crazy hard time getting my kids to stop talking so they could listen to what I was teaching them, because that's why they were there. They were not there to socialize, they were there to learn. Every teacher says something like that to their kids at least once a day, okay? And so what you have in schools, this is the other thing, who are your children surrounded by? They're in a classroom filled with kids the same age, right? We would call that, this is courtesy of a friend of mine who's a homeschooler, she calls that horizontal socialization, okay? Horizontal socialization. Kids that look the same basically as your kid. So same age, same grade, chances are in a lot of times same socioeconomic status. Not always, I know. Depending on where you live, probably really do look the same. There's probably not a whole lot of diversity there. And in some schools there are, and that's fantastic. However, when you think about socialization, who do you want socializing your child? Other kids their age? Is that really who you want them to learn social skills from? I do not want a 6-year-old child learning all their social skills from other 6-year-olds, right? That makes no sense. What you want is vertical socialization. You want your child learning from people older, more mature. You want your child learning how to work with people that are older, how to have a conversation with people that are older or younger, how to properly interact with people of different types, not people that are all the same as them. That's easy, right? I know how to talk to other 43-year-old women with kids. Like, that ain't hard, right? It's learning how to talk to other people who are not like me. That's the trick. And when we think about socializing, the true definition of that is learning how to properly interact with your society. What does your society look like? What does it mean to be a part of a community? It means knowing how to interact with people who are different from you. It means learning how to give value to that community somehow. It means learning how to cooperate. And so when we are homeschoolers, these are things that we have in mind. We know that we want our kids to have the ability to talk to different kinds of people. I want my kids to have friends, right? Like at their age group. And so I make sure that they have contact with people who are their age and have the same similar interests and things like that, of course. But that's not what socialization is. It's about knowing how to interact in society. And society looks absolutely nothing like school. When you think about the school environment, it is a completely artificial environment. And once you leave that, once you're done with academia, you are never in that kind of a pod again. You think about you go take a job, you have a boss who's probably older than you. You've got the intern who just came out of school and you're luckily a couple of years older, you actually get paid, right? Or you are volunteering somewhere and you're working with this 55-year-old grandma who her husband's retired and she's looking for something to do with her time, and people who don't look like you. That is socialization. And as homeschoolers, we have the opportunity to take our kids out and learn how to actually function in society. We spend loads of time in society because we're not chained to a desk for 7 hours a day. So that is why homeschoolers roll their eyes whenever someone pulls out the whole socialization thing. Because we know that socialization does not mean what everybody automatically thinks it means. And if you really sit and think about it, you'll probably realize, okay, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, school does not look like the real world, like in any way, shape, or form. So how can that be socialization? And even taking a somewhat base example, as a friend of mine pointed out the other day, when you socialize a dog, and no, I'm not comparing children to dogs, but I'm just saying, when you socialize a dog, what do? Do you bring your dog around other dogs of their breed and their type and their size? No, that's the whole point. You have to get them in different situations with different types of dogs. That's socializing, and that's what we do with our kids. We take them out to see what the real world looks like and to spend time in the real world, because the school environment, the classroom environment, does not reflect the real world at all. And so for those of us who really are very concerned about our child's socialization, that's one of the reasons we homeschool, because we don't think that is socialization. Now, there is something a little controversial that I feel like I have to bring up because it's coming up more and more, unfortunately. And that is, well, what about the families who really do pretty much raise their kids in a bubble and they're stuck inside and they're not, they don't let them socialize with anybody? That sucks. That's really wrong. It's not healthy to raise a child that way. And I would say that is a really bad idea. However, assuming that every homeschooler is like that and treating all homeschoolers like that's what we're like is ridiculous. Okay? You can't generalize from the one bad seed, right? And as a classroom teacher, I can tell you that just because a child is in conventional school, they're in a classroom, does not mean that they are getting the proper care at home that they should be getting, right? It's a really sad truth, but unfortunately, every teacher has stories of kids that they knew, they couldn't necessarily prove it, but they just could tell. Things at home were not right. So just because a child is in a conventional school system does not mean that the parent is doing everything that they should be doing, right? Just because someone is homeschooling doesn't mean that they are treating their child a certain way. So we need to not allow those very rare bad examples, bad seeds, taint the way that we see all of homeschooling. And when we see people starting to homeschool for so many different reasons, a lot of them being that the conventional school it's broken in so many ways, we need to realize that homeschoolers in general, they don't homeschool to try to hide their child away and to shield them from the outside world. That's not why we're homeschooling. Lots of reasons. That's almost never one of them. So the next time you hear somebody say, "Oh my gosh, homeschoolers aren't socialized," you can't socialize a child if they're homeschooled. I want you to remember what homeschooling is and what it isn't. It's not chained to a desk. It's not chained to a table 7 hours a day. It is having loads of time to be able to go out and experience the real world. And to remember what socialization actually is. It is not this. It's not real, true socialization is not horizontal. It's vertical. And this is what you get when you have the freedom to be able to go and do classes that are grouped by interest instead of by age. To be able to be in a co-op where you're with kids ranging the whole gamut, right? Where you are, you have so much time that you're able to go volunteer as a family, work together, do things with other people, go meet other people, go wander around downtown and see other people, because you're not stuck in this desk all day. So I hope that has sufficiently busted this ridiculous myth. I hope that if you have thought about homeschooling and this was one of your concerns, then I hope that this has helped. If you are a homeschooler already, either new or veteran, and you're sick and tired of hearing this, share this. I hope that you'll let people know, hey, there's someone who's explained what this versus this and why this is so much better. Oh, one more thing. I just remembered a story that I thought was so fantastic. One of the other myths, which I will bust another time, is that homeschoolers cannot get into college. Short answer, yes, they can. Slightly longer answer, colleges are starting to actively try to recruit homeschoolers. We'll talk more later about that. But one of the fantastic stories I heard was about the fact that there was a professor who was excited when he found out he had homeschoolers in his class because they were so much better at conversing with the teacher than students who had been raised in conventional classrooms. Because these students who were homeschooled had conversations with adults all the time. My children have full-on conversations, not the teacher asking a question, my child raising their hand and answering. That's not a conversation, right? I mean actual conversations about actual things. They have them with adults all the time, nearly every day, multiple times a day, sometimes. And because they are used to having those kinds of interactions with adults, when they get to college and they're talking with teachers, they're not intimidated by teachers. Because teachers have been, their mom, or their best friend's mom, or the lady that teaches the co-op, who's somebody else's mom. So they don't have this idea of teachers being someone that's intimidating to talk to, and so they're more likely to actually interact with their instructors, to actually raise their hand and ask questions in class. And yes, homeschoolers learn very quickly, you have to raise your hand. This is not socializing someone, teaching them to raise your hand. I can teach my kids that in 5 seconds. They don't need to school to learn that, right? So they learn, oh, raise my hand, and now I can actually talk to the professor. And the professor's like, oh my gosh, someone's actually talking to me. She's actually listening, and she's actually talking back because she's not afraid. She was not raised to only talk to people her age. She was raised to talk to anybody. Talk to people older, talk to people younger, talk to people, yes, her age, talk to adults, talk to parents, talk to grandparents, the cashier at work, blah, blah, blah. All these different things. And no, I'm not saying that kids that are in public school and private school don't learn those things. Of course they do. But they're not raised in an environment where it's the norm. They're not doing it all the time. Because that's what homeschoolers are immersed in, that's what they're used to. It's not weird for them. Oh, and weird. Oh gosh darn, I was gonna stop this thing 5 minutes ago. Sorry. Another thing. Oh, I'm so glad I thought of this. Okay. We tell kids in public school, march to your own beat. Be unique. Don't follow the crowd. But then we say homeschoolers are weird because they don't follow the crowd and they're unique. Do you see the hypocrisy here? Homeschoolers, and this is another thing, when they're talking to adults, they're used to talking about things that interest them. They have no qualms with that. There's, oh my gosh, my friend's son, I drive her son and daughter to rock wall climbing twice a week or once a week or whatever. And he tells me all the time, he'll get in the car and the first thing he'll say is, do you want to hear about my new Dungeons & Dragons character's backstory? And he'll tell me. I'm like, go for it, dude. Tell me all about it. I know absolutely nothing about Dungeons & Dragons. And if you were to walk up to, conventionally schooled kids and do that, they would probably be like, oh my gosh, he's so weird. In the homeschool crowd, we're like, oh, he plays D&D. He probably plays it at the tabletop thing that we do down at Space Cadets, which is our little comic book shop that we all go to and play our game. And that's cool. When you're done telling me about that, I'm going to tell you all about my Lego Ninjago thing that I created at home. Our kids are used to being unique and not being dinged for it. You try to be unique in conventional school, and what happens? You either get ostracized, or you get bullied, or you get teased, right? You do that in the homeschool crowd, and nobody bats an eye, because in the homeschool crowd, everybody gets to be themselves. They're not trying to shoehorn themselves into this idea of what popular looks like or what they have to be in order to sit at that table with those kids and not get picked on and not get a swirly in the bathroom during passing period, right? Because our kids get to be themselves. We don't tell them, oh, march to your own drum, and then turn around and tell them, stop being weird and try to fit in. So are homeschoolers unsocialized just because they strike you as awkward? No, the reason they strike you as awkward is because you're not used to kids being themselves. You're used to them trying to fit into a mold. Our kids don't do that. They get to be themselves. And because they get to be themselves, they come off looking awkward. And how sad is that? Our kids are doing what people keep telling these kids to do, but they're the ones that get teased. So I really better stop, get off this soapbox before I fall off it. So I hope that this video helped you learn something about socialization and why this is not true. Socializing is not what you think. Homeschoolers are most indeed socialized. And I hope you'll come back and hear another Bust a Myth episode coming up soon. And thank you so much for being here. Talk to you again later. Bye.